As we gather here on the eve of Veterans Day, which honors and celebrates the brave men and women who have served our country, I'd like to thank Jarvis and all of the governor's team who are here today for inviting SBA to be part of this incredible event. The panels have been amazing. And I'm also joined here today by several members of the SBA San Antonio team. If you don't mind, I'd like to just ask them to raise their hands. I have Deputy Director Inesa Stepanenko right there. I also have Orlando Castañeda, Business Opportunity Specialist, Ms. Shirley Smith, who is the Procurement Center representative back at the table. And we are just thrilled to be here today. And a special thank you to all of our veterans in the room today. Thank each and every one of you for your service and for the personal sacrifices you've made to keep us safe and free. I'm so proud to be part of the SBA San Antonio team. My team and I work hand in hand with our partners at the Small Business Development Center, the Veterans Business Outreach Center, or VBOC, and all of the incredible resource providers who are also here today. Before I introduce our amazing keynote speaker, Mr. Shilo Harris, I wanted to express my personal commitment to the small business community across our entire 55-county footprint. My team and I are especially laser focused, on making sure our veterans know about the resources and tools that can empower them to start and grow their own business. These resources include access to capital, business counseling, mentorship, and procurement opportunities. Please stop by and ask us about the Boots to Business Reboot program for veterans and their spouses, the SBA Express Loan program that waives the upfront guarantee fee for qualified veterans for loans up to $350,000, or the veteran and disabled veteran certification programs that enable you to compete for sole source and set-aside contracts. We know veterans turned entrepreneurs possess a unique set of skills and attributes that give veterans a competitive edge and can make them amazing entrepreneurs. Strong leadership skills, the ability to make tough decisions, inspire and motivate, adapt to changing circumstances, intense discipline and work ethic, attention to detail, and integrity. And that's just to name a few. And our keynote speaker, Shilo Harris, embodies all of these traits and so much more. Shilo came from a family with deep roots in military service. As a son of a Vietnam veteran, Shilo always knew he wanted to be a soldier. On September 11, 2001, his life changed forever. Shortly afterward, he enlisted as a cavalry scout in the U.S. Army. His first deployment was to Schweinfurt, Germany, with the 1st Infantry Division. From Germany, Shilo headed to war-torn Iraq. On his second deployment with the 10th Mountain Division, he was assigned and worked near southern Baghdad. On February 19, 2007, Harris's armored vehicle was struck by an improvised explosive device, or IED. The explosion injured the driver and ended 3 fellow soldiers' lives. Shilo survived with severe third-degree burns on 35% of his body. The severity of the burns meant the loss of Shilo's ears, the tip of his nose, and 3 fingers. The crushing explosion fractured his left collarbone and C7 vertebrae, damaged his lungs, and scarred him with TBI, PTS, and DE, and survivor guilt. The devastating injuries required that Shilo remain in medically induced coma for 48 days. After, he spent nearly 3 years recovering, which included undergoing intensive physical therapy and surgeries at the burn unit of Brooke Army Medical Center, or BAMC, now known as SAMC in San Antonio, Texas. While at BAMC, he was the first soldier to participate in cutting-edge regenerative stem cell research to regrow his fingers and later received prosthetic ears. Shilo's recovery has involved more than 80 surgeries to date, as there are surgeries required for the remainder of his life, which at times has required his family to spend hours a day on wound care. In 2010, he chose to medically retire from the Army. Shilo reflects on his time in the service that led him to his injuries, and I quote, "Everything in life is a gift. Sometimes it may not be the gift you want, but you realize that your challenges are a new beginning." Today, Shilo is a motivational speaker, sharing his story with corporate groups, veterans, and medical teams around the world on how to overcome adversity, balance personal and professional life, motivational leadership, customer service success, raising awareness of physical, emotional, and mental scars of war, and serving as an inspiration to fellow soldiers, veterans, and their families. Shilo shares his inspiring story in his memoir, Steel Will, My Journey Through Hell to Become the Man I Was Meant to Be, published September 1, 2014 by Baker Books. His short film, Shilo, released in 2018, is currently in the works for a feature film. Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the screens for a brief video.
Freedom, the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom.
My name is Staff Sergeant Shilo, retired United States Army. I joined the military after 9/11/2001, when our nation was attacked in one of the most heinous attacks in history. We lost almost 4,000 innocent lives in a matter of hours. I felt like it was my calling and my duty to serve my nation. And my scars are a gift. I feel like God's given me tools to serve my community better.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Staff Sergeant Shilo Harris.
Well, I already got you up out of your seat, so I feel like my job's half done, right? Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, my mic came off. I was making sure. Thank you all very much for that very warm welcome. And before I get started, is Jarvis in the room still? Oh, hey, if you can start making your way up here, I got something for you. I brought a military challenge coin, and for those of you that don't know, the military challenge coin started in World War II. There was a young lieutenant wanted to get his team something that had their mantra and probably their little emblem, you know, their logo and that sort of thing to build team spirit. Well, one of the pilots ended up getting shot down. The coin, since it had no monetary value, that pilot was allowed to keep it while he was in a POW camp. Eventually, he escaped the POW camp, and that coin was able to get him back into friendly forces. You know, they wanted to make sure he wasn't a spy and that sort of thing. Well, the markers and everything on the coin, of course, helped identify him and get him to the right people. and now it's become a military tradition. And the colonel here can probably attest, but he actually might be able to tell me if this is true or not. I think it's just a way for senior officers and NCOs to get out of having to do paperwork, kind of like an attaboy nowadays, you know, and instead of handing out a medal or something. But Jarvis, I wanted to give this to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, brother.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I grew up in West Texas, Odessa, Midland area. Anybody, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that area. And being a hometown veteran, you know, got wounded in Iraq, I get invited back home quite a bit for this, that, and the other. One of the trips that I was heading out there, I realized that I'd traded in my combat boots for cowboy boots, and I had my big belt buckle on, but I didn't have a cowboy hat. So I decided to go get a hat. Well, it also works out because I'm a burn survivor. Being a burn guy, I have to regulate my body temperature, which is why we have the fans. Because if I overheat, man, I blank out, and it's just not good. Well, it was going to be an outdoor event, and again, it's Texas, and it's West Texas. So I go to the Western Wear store, and I told the little girl, I said, I don't even know what size my head is nowadays, so let's start small and work our way up. Well, she did what I asked. She brought over a couple of hats. The first hat was like a child's hat. Had an elastic band in it, and it just barely sat on the crown of my head. Well, clearly that one wasn't it, right? Well, like a good salesperson, she brought over another hat. As I was pulling this hat off, I figured she could just size me up. Well, she set that other hat up there and popped it down. Well, when she did, both my ears popped off. My ears popped off, and they're bouncing around on the floor. I just pulled my ears off for you guys, and y'all aren't laughing? So my ears pop off, and they're bouncing around on the floor, and they're kind of rubbery. I wasn't even wearing my Spock ears that day, and believe it or not, I do have Spock ears, but I have them in the back over there. So anyway, I'm scrambling around trying to pick up my ears, and I probably look like a hot mess, right? Come on, I'm giving y'all gold here. So I'm putting myself back together, and all of a sudden I realize I'm out in West Texas. I'm not here in San Antonio. You know, San Antonio, they're used to seeing guys and gals like me, right? Missing stuff or injured or whatever. And anyway, I realized that I'm out there in West Texas, and I look up, and that little girl was just like, I scared her to pieces. Of course, I didn't mean to. Honestly, I didn't even know what to say. And on top of that, I had just gotten my ears. I was immediately embarrassed, you know. So that was actually a really awkward conversation. It'll be another conversation for another day when they said, hey, let's walk around the clinic and you can pick ears. And I'm like on people? I'm like, wait, do I get the accessories? Because I think I got good taste. But anyway, so I'm putting myself back together. I didn't know what to say. I'm embarrassed. I said the first thing that came to mind. I was like, bet that happens a lot, huh? She wasn't having it. Well, I get on to my event, and I'm telling my buddies about it. One of them's a Baptist preacher, and the other one's a Vietnam veteran. And veterans and military, we have a dark sense of humor at times, you know, and we kind of jab at insensitive things at times. Well, I figured the veteran would be the one poking fun at me, but he was the one consoling me. And the Baptist preacher looks at me and he goes, dude, you could have got a free hat. I was like, what? And he was like, when your ears fell off, you should have grabbed your head. Ah! If I'd have played it right, I might have got a whole new outfit. Thank you very much for laughing at my funnies. I'm glad everybody's loosened up. Everybody having a good day? All right, so we're going to dive in, and when we do, we're going to go down, we're going to come back up, so just bear with me, all right? And some of it's going to be a reiteration of what you've seen and what you heard, but I did join after 9/11/2001. And I know that pretty much everybody in here, if not everybody, knows exactly what that means. But for context, it's the day that our nation was attacked in one of the worst attacks in history. Not just American history, but history itself. We lost almost 4,000 lives in a matter of hours. I felt like it was my calling and my duty to step up and serve my nation. You know, I came from a family of veterans. My father and my grandfather both served. Well, actually, I had two grandfathers that served in World War II. One served in Korea as well. My dad served in Vietnam. So I grew up listening to those stories. Unfortunately, it was until I was 27 years old before I was able to join. You know, it just felt like an opportunity missed for whatever reason. But when 9/11 happened, I knew that I had to go do something. So I did what a lot of young men and women do. I called my dad and was like, hey man, what should I do? You know, he was a paratrooper, 82nd Airborne, infantry guy. And I figured he'd be all gung-ho, you know, like, join the Army, join the infantry. And he was like, bro, join the Air Force. It is so much better. That's what I've heard. Is that true, sir? He's like, yeah. Anyway, went to the recruiters, and I was just walking down the road. I wanted to join. I didn't care who accepted me, but I wanted to join the military. Air Force wouldn't have me. I walked out of the Air Force recruiter, and the Army recruiter literally leaned up against the wall waiting on me. And I'm like, you waiting on me? He goes, yep. I'm like, all right, let's go. I went in there. I joined a combat MOS because that's what I wanted. I mean, I really did want to kick in doors and arrest bad guys because those are the stories I grew up on. I knew full well where I was going to end up going. Did you pull up the picture of the parents already? The dad and granddad? Oh, can you go back to that one? Okay, I got to show you all this. So that's a picture of me before I got injured there in the red shirt. I know. All right, that's silly. But anyway, so again, I knew where I was going. You know, we were looking at a time of war. We'd been attacked. My first deployment was with the Big Red 1 out of Schweinfurt, Germany. We were mechanized. We were on tanks and Bradleys. And again, that deployment was everything that I was hoping it would be. Kicking in doors, arresting bad guys, and all that cool stuff. You know, but at the end of the day, I'd get back to the room, and I'd look at those things that were important to me because we had some near misses. And, you know, we were seeing friends get hurt and worse. Anyway, I'd get back and I'd see those pictures on my wall of why I joined the military, the things that are important to me, my family, the people that I love, my friends. And it'd give you a taste of mortality, and it helped grow me up quite a bit. I remember deploying with a bunch of young men and women. And, you know, and sometimes I go and I talk to some of the young soldiers now, and I'm thinking, did they check their IDs before they came in here? And I know that that's how we deployed. You know, a lot of these young men and women go into combat, and in 1 year, it looks like they've aged 5 years. That's how stressful it is. Well, it taught me a lot, and it prepared me for my second deployment. My second deployment was with the 10th Mountain Division. Again, it was tactical, but we had a little different focus this time. It was more of the humanitarian, hearts and minds kind of thing. And it was really rewarding for me because, you know, I mean, I have a family. And altogether, I have 7 kids. I know that I have to buy a bus, and we're going to have to buy extra food for Thanksgiving, but that's okay. You know, I wanted a big family. And when we were over there doing this humanitarian stuff, we would escort medical teams into areas where people had never seen a doctor before in their lives. You know, we were helping rebuild schools. We were training police officers. We were training the military so they could take over their own security. All these things were really, really rewarding for me. Now, unfortunately, on that same deployment, we got a call to investigate a possible IED in our area. And generally what that means is we have to go over there and secure that site as quickly and as safely as possible. Now, the roads that we had to drive up and down were extremely high risk, of course. You know, and I know that y'all have heard stories about the IEDs, but let me tell you this. The area that we worked south of Baghdad, and a lot of people know it as the Sunni Triangle, all the roads out there were named after heavy metal bands. Route Metallica, Megadeth, Iron Maiden, you name it, rightfully so. Because those roads were riddled with IEDs. Every 20 to 50 meters on some of those roads. They'd take up the entire width of the road. They would just keep using that same soft dirt and putting more IEDs in there. And we knew it was there. We just had to be extremely cautious. Well, we get this call to investigate an IED, and they gave us a location, and we're thinking it was set up as an ambush scenario, knowing where we were and where we would drive to get there. It was just one of those days. I was the third truck in the convoy. We were in Humvees, driving down this road, Route Metallica, as cautiously as possible, and my Humvee literally erupted. 3 of the 4 Humvee doors were blown off. The entire top of the truck was blown off. And as you've seen, I lost 3 friends that day. Now, I know we have a room full of veterans here today, and I'm sure that many of you, if not all of you, would agree with this. But as veterans, you know, when we're wearing our little ribbons or our uniforms and stuff like that, or people know who we are, we get called hero and stuff like that. And it comes with a bittersweet taste. It is very welcoming, of course, because we want to be welcomed home. Yet For those of us that have served, these are the true heroes, the ones that gave everything for their nation. I was knocked unconscious. I don't really remember a lot from the blast. Obviously, I'm laying there in the truck. They came over and they retrieved my driver, the other survivor, which I'm still astonished that any of us survived, because the IED went off right behind the driver's seat, blew the frame out and everything. I mean, 700-pound bomb. How did any of us survive? Well, they come and they started tending to my driver, because that's the right thing to do. Well, they left me in the truck because I was unconscious. They didn't know if I was dead or alive. Right thing to do. They leave me there. They start tending to him, and he's a big guy. He's in shock. He's fighting with everybody. And while I was in the truck, the AT-4 cooked off and caused a fireball, and it burned me. I didn't know that until I was actually working on my book, Still Will. I mean, I knew that I had survived one blast, and obviously I knew that I was injured significantly. But as we were working on the book, we were getting an account of that day from a lot of the people that were on the ground, and they said, "Man, we thought you were dead the first time." Well, when that second blast happened, we were thinking, well, he's certainly dead now. And then all of a sudden I wake up and I start trying to call up a radio report, which is what you do. I was a truck commander. And it's muscle memory. I just started, hey, trying to let everybody know what happened just in case they missed the mushroom cloud. Anyway, I look over and I wasn't hearing anything on the hand mic, and the cable was burnt completely off of it. So I threw the hand mic down. I could feel the flames around me. I knew I needed to get out of the Humvee. And I start pushing on the door. As I'm pushing on the door, this arm felt funny. Not ha-ha, obviously, but I remember looking over, and this is when I knew I was pretty hurt. I just still had no idea the extent of my injuries. But it was like I was looking through straws. It's like this tunnel vision kind of thing. And so I knew I'd taken a hit, and I looked over, and my uniform was melted into my skin. And I was still thinking, I got to get out of the truck because the truck's on fire. I could feel it burning, and I'm pushing. And the way that IED went off, it lifted that vehicle in the air, and it come back down, and all that loose dirt and asphalt from the blast had that door kind of jammed. And those doors, I don't even know how much they weigh, but it was probably 400 or 500 pounds. And the shape that I was in, I don't believe that I should have been able to kick myself out of that Humvee, but I did. I get out, and I'm standing there, and I'm taking in all this carnage and the smell, and it's like I'm getting my sight back. And I see everybody over there, kind of wrestling with my driver, trying to get him sustained and get him calmed down. Well, as an NCO, I start barking orders. I'm like, hey, who's calling up the 9 line over there? Hey, who's it? Y'all keep working on Adam. Where's the medics? I just start barking orders, and everybody's just looking at me. Everybody just stops and just starts staring. Well, again, what are y'all doing? But again, they thought I had died, not once, but twice. And then there I was barking orders. And on top of that, the way I looked, they probably didn't recognize me, right? They were like, who is that guy? Well, my attention gets redirected back over to the 2 vehicles that were in front of me. And there's one of my buddies, he's over there waving at me. And I can see him doing this, and I can see his mouth moving. But I wasn't hearing anything. It's just muffled, real muffled. And it's like I could hear things, but it's like I was in a vacuum. And my attention got redirected over here. My leg was burning. And when I looked down to see what was burning my leg, the flames licked me in the face. My body armor was on fire, and the material was melting and running down my leg. So I get the body armor off, get that fire put out, which was probably another divine moment because it was my ammo pouches that were on fire. I had 200 plus rounds that was probably about to start cooking off. So I get that done, turn back around and see what my buddy wanted, and then all of a sudden he comes out and he grabs me from behind. I didn't even see him circle around because I was focusing on this. He comes out and he grabs me. And he's shielding me, and he starts running with me. As we're moving and our bodies make that contact, my ears pop for the first time. And I heard this pop and a zing, pop and a zing. Bullets were flying all around me, and I didn't know it. That's why he was trying to get me to come over there and get in cover. I had no Kevlar. My Kevlar was gone, probably with my ears. And all of a sudden we're running. Now think about this. I'm out there completely exposed. Now, how many veterans do we have in the audience here right now? Thank you so much for your service. Now, obviously, we have some active duty. Thank you so very much for your service, sir. And if we have any other active duty, of course, when I say veterans, I'm kind of assuming that that means the ones that are in uniform as well now. But I want you to think about this for a second. He ran out there in a hail of bullets. And when I say a hail of bullets, my truck was still on fire. We had ammo cans in there, 50 cal, 240 rounds, 5.56, all these bullets cooking off. And that's what was zipping around me. They weren't shooting at me, which was my first thought. I was like, well, great, now they're shooting at me. But what was happening is my truck, all of those bullets were cooking off, and he ran out there. That's the kind of men and women that you have in this audience right now. The men and women that are willing to run towards the danger, obviously for people that they love and care about, but also for strangers. He gets me, grabs me, shields me. They lay me on the ground, they get me over there in cover, and we start, prepping for the medevac. It doesn't seem like it's very long. I can hear the helicopter coming in. My roommate comes over, and I felt very vulnerable now. I don't have any body armor on, which was kind of fine, but now I'm laying on my back. I'm laying on the ground, and I'm starting to feel everything. Everything's starting to be really uncomfortable. Everything's starting to hurt. And I just feel really, really vulnerable. And my roommate, he comes over, and I almost felt like he was straddling over me, but he probably wasn't. One guy's working on me. He's getting an IV in me. They're getting me prepped for the medevac. And my roommate, he's sitting there. We're having this conversation. And as I said, veterans have a little bit of a dark sense of humor. It's a coping mechanism, I'm sure, because of some of the things that we have to witness on the battlefield and even in training in many cases. As we're having this conversation, I'm like, hey, they're not going to make me pay for that Humvee, are they? Because I don't make a lot of money yet. He kind of laughs it off, and we're having this conversation, and all of a sudden I got a glimpse of my reflection in his glasses. I could see that my hair was gone, my nose, my ears were gone, my face was charred black. I had blood running out of everywhere. And I kept thinking, that can't be me. I was like, Lord, that can't be me. I started panicking. And this is where I think my age potentially played a role in helping me calm myself down, because if you don't know, shock can kill you, especially in that state, and feeling vulnerable and like that. Anyway, I'm laying there, start panicking. I start trying to do a self-assessment. I'm like, all right, just how bad is it? They pushed my buddy away. Whatever was happening, they knew it wasn't right. And so I start looking at this arm again. Okay, well, I know that's bad. And I remember looking at this hand, and it was a mess. I'm not going to go into detail. I know everybody just got done eating lunch. But this was my first thought, and it was a little selfish, but I was thinking, I better get a day off for this. You don't get a lot of days off in combat. That's no joke. So just so you know, they did give me a few days off. That's usually one of the questions. They're like, so did you get a day off? And I'm like, absolutely. I got like almost a whole year off. But anyway, the helicopter comes in. They get me on the helicopter, and they get me into the green zone in Baghdad. I don't remember a whole lot when I get to Baghdad. I remember the helicopter ride because my driver and I were communicating. Me and him were talking, and I'd been asking, we're like, where's our friends? Where's our soldiers? Because we didn't know the status on them yet. We just knew that me and him were together, and we kept asking, where's my soldiers? Where's our soldiers? Where's our friends? We get to the OR. He goes one way, I go the other. I'm asking, and it was really weird. Usually, for me, I'm a very personable person. I like to make eye contact, a firm handshake, stuff like that. Things that we need to do in business. It's just the way you represent yourself, right? And so I'm asking everybody, I'm like, where is my friend? And nobody's making eye contact, nobody's talking to me until this doctor right here, I'm laying on this thing, and he's up here and he looks down at me, and he's like, he makes perfect eye contact, and he said, you'll find out in a couple of months. I had no idea what that meant. But in that moment, that's when I was medically induced into the coma that I spent about 48 days in. And I say 48 days loosely for the simple fact that, there was no day one, like, oh, I wake up and, oh yeah, where am I? It wasn't like that. I mean, it was just a gradual process of them weaning me off medication. And so I couldn't tell you day one. But I can tell you the day that I realized what I was faced with. It was like that cornerstone of my recovery. They walked into my room and they said, Sergeant Harris, today we want you to take 10 steps. I was thinking 10 steps. I was like, man, I'm a combat soldier. I'm going to own this hospital. I was all cocky about it, you know. Well, just getting out of bed was excruciating. Every bone, every joint, every muscle, everything hurt beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Now, I'm going to say this, but we're going to come out of it. I crippled myself. I mentally crippled myself because I started saying things like, I can't, I won't, it's too hard. Bruce Lee said that words are poison. Even if you don't mean them, words are poison. Your brain doesn't know the difference. And when you start telling yourself, I can't, I won't, things like that, your body reacts. I went by 3 or 4 days like this. My mom used to come in. By the way, this is my mother, Teresa, here in the green dress. Now, I got to tell you this before I get to the next part. So I introduce her sometimes as my mother, Teresa, and then they'll catch her off on the side and be like, are you really Mother Teresa? So she is my mother, and her name is Teresa, and a lot of my friends and I all think of her as a saint, no joke, because she has endured so much. She used to come into the hospital room and see me in all of these bandages. She pretty much watched me die multiple times. It was hit and miss so many times. And if you would have told us back then that I'd be here like this today, we probably wouldn't have believed you. But that day, when I realized what I was faced with, crippled me, I went through this pity party process. My mom come in one morning, she's rubbing on my feet and helping feed breakfast and everything, because that was all she could touch was my feet. Everything else was bandaged. She kept telling me, you got to do this, son. You can do this. You got to do it. Your family needs you. We need you. I'm like, yeah, I know. But my heart still wasn't in it. Well, she left the room. A couple minutes later, my dad came in. My dad, he's, short, stocky guy. Looked like a little Viking. All he needs is an axe, He comes in, he's standing there. He's just staring at me. He just keeps staring at me. It's so uncomfortable, of course. This went on for, seconds. As you know, seconds can feel like minutes when your parents are giving you that look. And I was like, what is it? I knew there was a message. Again, I was kind of cocky, He drug it out a few more seconds, letting that really build up in there. And then he said, are you done, soldier? I said, excuse me, sir? Are you done, soldier? No, sir, I am not done. Then get your ass up and start doing the work that you know you're supposed to be doing. And he turned around and he walked out of that room and left me with my thoughts. And when you have perspective like that, it'll change you here, it'll change you here. And I did. I started putting in the effort. I turned those 3 little steps that I was able to scuffle out into 10 steps, 20 steps. And then before long, I was walking around the hospital. Not by myself a lot of times, because I was still on the step-down ward. Anybody familiar with BAMC? So just so you know, there's ICU and then there's a step-down ward for burn survivors. You're really not supposed to be walking around. And a lot of people don't believe this, but I remember one day it was real quiet on the floor. And I was the funny guy. I still was real, banged up. And I couldn't even use my hands. I was kind of dragging my IV with me sometimes when I was going to the restroom. That's not me, is it? We'll wait for that. Anyway, I was still really banged up, and I was kind of dragging my IV, and I went to the restroom, and I come out. I'm not seeing anybody. It's all quiet on the floor. And then all of a sudden, I remembered there's Burger King down in the basement from one of the orientations that we had. And there's a lot of things that you think about when you're deployed. One of them is definitely food. And I was thinking, I've been eating or sucking on these powdery drinks, that's supposed to be good for me. I was thinking, I'd give anything for a Whopper, right? So I head down into Burger King. I make it all the way down there. I'm in line at Burger King, and I try to order a Whopper. I'm dragging my IV. Nobody says anything to me. I'm pretty sure hospital policy was changed because of this moment. And I'm trying to order a Whopper. I don't even have a wallet or pockets or anything. I don't even remember if I had a backside covered, But I make it all the way there. I make it all the way there, and then I'm trying to order this Whopper, and the little girl, she goes, "What are you going to do with it, honey?" And I was thinking, because I couldn't even use my hands, I was thinking, if I could just get it in front of me, I'd be like, well, needless to say, I didn't get my Whopper. All of a sudden, here comes this nurse, and she's like, "Sergeant Harris, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, crap." Trying to hobble out of there. But yeah, I got caught. I have had a phenomenal recovery. I've been so blessed in so many ways. And since we're here for the Small Business Conference, I felt like it was important to talk about some of my endeavors and some of the transitional issues that I faced. And then what we're going to do after that, I want you to start thinking now about some questions that you might want to ask. And before I step off the stage, we'll take a few questions, and then I'll probably wrap it up, time-wise, with a quick little story, and then we'll go on to our next break. And just so y'all know, we'll be signing books, and I'll have some shirts and stuff over there if anybody's interested in getting a book. But I did not intend on being a motivational speaker. As I said, I was heavily medicated going through my recovery, which was 3-4 years, and this is I retired in 2010, and even that was a decision that had to be made because they offered for me to stay in the military. I was looking at some positions, I felt really good about it, yet I also had opportunities on the outside of the military. But one day I was walking around the hospital, and I poked my head into a door that I thought was my doctor's office, and it was not. And it was a small conference room, probably about the size of a couple of rows of tables here. And there was incoming cadres, chaplains, and that sort of thing. And I poked in, and they were facing me, and there was a lady standing right here, and she goes, "Oh, you must be our guest speaker." And I said, "I'm not, but I can be." And, kind of joking around. I was like, "I'm actually looking for my doctor's office." And she said, "Well, do you have a couple minutes?" And that is literally how it started. They gave a little Q&A. One thing led to another. I did not even know that motivational speaking was a thing where you could get paid. I thought people did it as a hobby to sell their books and stuff. I didn't know. Well, that event led to another one and another one and another one, and then I just put one foot in front of the other like soldiers do. And I just kept marching, and I've been marching ever since. But in the process, as I said, I didn't know that motivational speaking was a business. I didn't know that it could be. And then one day I was doing this little speaking job. I was just doing it, out of the kindness of my heart because I wanted to help veterans. I wanted to help other service members transition out of the military. I was still active duty. I'm sure I'll come speak. Well, one day somebody handed me a check. And I'm like, "What's this for?" And they said, "Oh, that's your speaking fee. We're going to give you an honorarium." And I'm like, people can actually get paid doing this? But it still just didn't feel right. I felt like it had to be a tangible business because that's what I grew up with. I felt like I had to have a, brick and mortar. I felt like I had to have a storefront or a product or a service of some sort, and I didn't know that this was a service. And I tried a couple of things, and it was like I was trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and it just didn't fit. I remember I was doing this home inspection business for a while, and unfortunately it didn't go real well for the simple fact that I'd go and do, my little home inspection business presentation at real estate offices, and they'd be like, "Shilo, this is not who you are, man." Maybe I boxed myself in by doing the entertainment first, but I'm like, "Well, today I'm here as a home inspector," and they're like, "How about you come back next week and we'll pay you to speak to our team as a motivational speaker?" And I'm like, "I'll take that too." Never pass up on an opportunity, right? And that's what I've learned. Now, as I've fully embraced my role, which is what I think that a lot of people miss sometimes, they feel like they need to put that square peg in that round hole even if it doesn't fit. And that's sometimes when we fail most gloriously because we don't fully embrace it. We don't put our full heart into it. But here's another thing that you can learn is that you learn from failure. Just because you fail the first time doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to fail the next time or the next time. That means that you're learning from those failures. So they're not really failures. They're a learning process getting you to something bigger and better. And then once you fully embrace it and you do your education, and this is another thing that's really important about veterans, is that when you're in the military, and I know the Air Force has their own, but say with the Army, we live by a set of values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And when you look at that acronym, it's leadership. That's what they teach each and every service member in our armed forces. They teach them leadership. And the government spends thousands of dollars on them to be adaptive, to teach them how to be professional. And even if you don't know off the top of your head, you know where to find the information. And as I said, veterans are not scared to commit and sacrifice for the greater good.
Thank you for your service. My question is, I know everybody has to overcome certain things, and somebody always says, what was your why? Did you have a why, or was it just your ability to just keep going and be resilient? Or did you have a specific why?
Keep them running.
Most people, when they're overcoming adversity, they have a why, something that motivates them.
Oh, the why.
What was your why?
Oh, that's it. That's really good. And thank you. So, a moment ago, you probably seen a picture of my family. Like when I was pretty banged up, my children are around me. My children were so young when all this happened. I remember the first time my oldest son saw me in uniform. I was a hero in his eyes. And it made me feel so very good. I was empowered. And then I come back hurt. And I remember the first time he saw me laying in that hospital bed. It was heartbreaking. And, once I did grasp, what I was faced with and knew that I had to do, I really wanted to do it for my family. That was number one, of course. But number two, maybe I shouldn't put these in order, so to speak, but, my faith helped get me through a lot of things. And I've always believed that God didn't bring me this far to fail me. God didn't save me so I could sit at the house and drink iced tea on the porch and be a cripple. It's okay if you're handicapped. We all know that. There's still a lot that we have to offer. I mean, honestly, you could not have made me believe that I would be here today like this. And I don't live myself looking at my injuries. I live my life looking at the successes and where I can go with the abilities that I currently have. Because we all have limitations. We all have limitations. Can you run 5 miles in, seriously, no. Some people can. So everybody has limitations. But why? My why was God, family, and I wanted to help represent other service members that might not have a good voice the way that I do. I feel like that's another part of my gift, is to be able to have a voice, and so I should use it. So if you have a gift or a superpower, tap into that, whatever it is. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't hide from it. Embrace it. Lean into it. Use it. Capitalize on it. That's what we have to do in business. We have to use our entire tool bag to be successful. Great question. Thank you very much. Another question?
Yes, thank you for your service. My question is, you mentioned you had 2 options. You said you could have stayed in the military or you could have gotten out, and you chose to get out. So if you would have stayed, what would you have been doing?
What were your job options if you stayed in instead of retiring?
Okay, so I don't know how I feel about saying this one, because sometimes I look back and I'm like, damn. I was speaking in the military. The public affairs office, they really tapped in on me because I was positive. They're like, and even some people, they'd come around looking for me to say something ugly about the military. That's not who I am. I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of my uniform. I'm proud of my brothers and sisters that served in the military beside me. You know what I'm saying? So, they come to me and they said, hey, we want to offer you a position. And this is when they were standing up a lot of the warrior battalions. And it was a new process. They were, seeing how it went. But they had to start keeping track of soldiers and service members because they were kind of getting lost. There were a lot of young men and women coming back, and they had all these nonprofit organizations just, sending out money. My driver, I gotta tell a story on him. And I remember he showed up at my house one morning, and he had mail sent to my place because he couldn't get mail for whatever reason at his barracks, or he was worried it'd get lost. And he showed up, and he was so high on medication and drunk first thing in the morning that it scared me. He had like a little vomit running down his shirt, and I was like, nope, 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 nope. I felt like it was really important, you know, these WTBs were getting stood up to keep track of these service members and keep them on track for their recovery process. Otherwise, we might have lost more than we had expected. So when they first approached me about the position, it was actually going to be in D.C., working with the Joint Chiefs and under the President, whichever President it would have been, you know, at that time. And ultimately, I came back with the offer, and I presented it to my family. And, you know, of course, my kids, you know, they're just thinking, Dad's in uniform, he might get deployed again, and it kind of scared them. And anyway, so I was like, yeah, but we could go to D.C., we could see the Capitol, and they were like, nope. And so I had to really weigh it out. You know, do I respect my family's desires and input on this, or do I go ahead and look at other opportunities? Now, there's another part to that as well, though. On the outside opportunities, you know, yes, I was speaking, but it was still kind of a hobby for me. I had been that outspoken veteran. I'd been on stage. There are a lot of people that own businesses. They're like, we want you to be a part of our business. The minute you retire, bro, you call me. Well, I started dropping resumes before my retirement package dropped, you know, trying to get that next job, start going ahead and getting that next check, you know, being proactive, looking at my options. And the well dried up. Now, I know that my circumstances might be a little different because, you know, I'm walking in, those guys are probably thinking, yeah, but what if he gets hurt on the job? Or will he be able to handle this mentally? Will he be able to handle it emotionally? Will he be able to handle it physically? And so I know these are factors that face some of our more severely injured service members, yet at the same time, I know a great many of them that have injuries, I would say, worse than I, although I don't encourage, you know, comparing injuries. You know, I know that there's some guys that are worse off than I am, and they're extremely successful in owning their own businesses. They're extremely successful in working at executive positions and taking on, you know, pretty strenuous jobs. So, you know, I think it comes with the territory. It depends on the person. So again, I kind of leaned in on my strengths, which was the speaking, and that's where I'm at today. So that's an excellent question. Thank you. I was actually debating on bringing that up because I was like, did I bring that up into my presentation? Because I don't want to say anything negative. I don't want anybody to feel discouraged. But these are all hard truths sometimes that we have to consider. I want you to consider that with a grain of salt as you start considering, you know, who you're going to have on your workforce, or if you're a veteran with injuries or disabilities, you know, how you're going to step into a career or a position. So, great question. Anybody else?
No question. You said your why. One of the reasons of your why was your older son. When he first saw you in uniform, you were his hero. How did your healing process, how did his attitude change and also impact on your other children as you went through that healing process?
I think I got this one. Let me make sure. So you're talking about how my healing process affected everybody, or how did I get through it?
Well, I mean, you talk about your why was your son, right? When he first saw you before your injury, you were his hero. After your injury and going through the process, how did the relationship change or develop as you went through the healing process? That's more a personal question, not business related.
All right, that's actually another really great question. So obviously, you know, the relationship with my children grew, and I think that a lot of it was that shock and awe. You know, when my kids first see me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you know, I don't know if anybody grew up with a disabled parent, but I know some of my friends did when I was growing up, and it was almost like they were a little ashamed sometimes. You know, like, "Oh, sorry, my dad's, you know, he's disabled or whatever, or my mom's disabled," and I guess I didn't want to project that on my children. Yet maybe they felt like they were going to be judged for whatever reason because they had a disabled family member. And again, these are children. You know, these aren't ill thoughts. I mean, they're children. They don't know. They're still trying to comprehend. Something I had to consider was, you know, how young my children were. Now, I learned this early on, and it was after a moment, I was going in for a surgery, and it was just something on my hand. Now, it was an infection that ultimately could have took my whole hand. But they were like, okay, we're going to go in there, we're going to clean out the infection, blah, blah, blah. Well, these are conversations that we had as adults with the children, kind of on standby over here, maybe overhearing the conversation, but we never fully explained the conversation because you're talking medical terms, you're talking things over the children's heads. Now, we learned that we had to communicate with the children at their level a lot of times because their imagination can take hold. Now, when they said, when my daughter, right before the surgery, we'd had this conversation because my hand was in a great deal of pain and it was really bad. And so, we knew that we had to have the surgery. It was a conversation that we had. So we're going in for this surgery. As we've said, we've had 80 surgeries. And I say we as a family because we've all walked this path. Going into the surgery, my daughter goes, "Daddy, I will still love you even if they take your arm off." And I was like, "Oh, baby, we're not going to go there. It's not going to be like that. This is the surgery to prevent stuff like that." I said, "Everything's fine." But it was, that's an example of how sometimes their imagination can take it out of. And so again, this goes right back to professionalism, your business. What do you expect of your children in a professional setting? It's like I tell all my children, hey, when we go here, Dad's working. Yes, I'm still your dad. We can still, play around or whatever, but it's got to be somewhat respectful. Don't disrespect me in public. Because I let my kids joke with me around the house. They even have burn jokes. We've graduated to burn jokes now. I remember one day I was in there and doing something, and there was this fly kept bothering me. I'm like, oh, it's like I hate flies. There's like a bazillion flies in Iraq. I hate flies so bad. Anyway, my daughter goes, "It's because you smell like barbecue." And then it was like, and I was like, "Oh, that was good. That was good." So I was kind of encouraging it, so they felt comfortable with the process. I can joke about it. I joke about it all the time. I don't mind if my buddies joke about it. Now, if a stranger walks up and be like, "Dang, what's that smell? It smells like barbecue." I'm like, "What's up?" All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up real quick. And if anybody else has any questions, please come by the table. Like I said, we'll be signing books over there. I'd love for you to come by and get a book. You don't have to. If you're a veteran and you can't afford a book, I would like to give you a book. I'll tell you, a lot of people are really good about leaving an extra $5, $10, $20 or so and be like, let a veteran get a book. So I'd be happy to sign you a book over there. Some of them are signed already. I have to save my hand. But I'm going to wrap up with one little story here, and I hope that this is that one that'll lift you up on the way out the door, okay? All right, so my daughter, as I mentioned, she was probably one of my biggest motivators, honestly. She was just, I only had one daughter. I tell you, so 2 of my children are stepchildren, so I have 5 kids, and one of them, my little girl. I literally ordered her. I'm like, this is what I want in a daughter, and I got it. I'm like, thank you, Lord. So she's been my blessing. She's been my rock in a lot of cases. Well, one day, I was watching my family do stuff around the house, unpack boxes, and moving into military housing or whatever. I felt really worthless, because I'm still pretty banged up. I'm fragile. Everything's real easy to wound again. So they saw me pouting. Somebody handed me a hammer and a nail and said, "Go hang something," because that's my thing. I like to hang stuff. It's got to be dress right dress. It's got to be low square. It's just my thing, right? Military thing, my little OCD. I don't know. But anyway, first thing I did was hit this finger with that hammer and knock the skin off. I was on blood thinners and blood's running everywhere. And now for all you tough guys out there, y'all can give me a hard time if you want, but dude, I started crying. No joke. I started crying, and this is another part of that. Is like you have a lot of emotional buildup because you don't have a physical outlet. And I think this is another really important thing for people to consider. Going to the gym, working out, having a routine is extremely important in business. Because even if you don't really think you're stressed out in your business, sometimes it can be very stressful and you just don't realize it because you're used to dealing with it. You get comfortable with the stress. You need an outlet. I didn't have an outlet. I'm crying, got blood running everywhere. Here comes my daughter, 5 years old. 5 years old. She comes running over and she's like, "Oh, Daddy, it's okay." She gets me to the bathroom and she knows where everything is. She doctors me up. And this is my 5-year-old. I'm so impressed. And she's like, "Hey, Daddy, you want to go outside and jump on the trampoline?" And at the moment, of course, I didn't really want to. And I'm like, "Yeah." I shouldn't say that. She was like, "You want to go outside?" I'm like, yeah. She leads me out. We go to the trampoline. And although I didn't really feel like jumping, we laid on the trampoline. We're laying there. And she's talking, and we're looking at the clouds and talking about shapes and what we're seeing. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And it was a beautiful day. Blue skies, big puffy white clouds. And she says, Daddy, would you like to pray? I'm like, absolutely. I said, would you like to lead us? She prayed. 5 years old. She prayed for everybody. She prayed for aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. I mean, you name it. She even prayed for her brothers. And bro, that don't happen very often, you know what I'm saying? She prayed for everybody. But she didn't ask the Lord for one thing for herself. And I knew in that moment that if my 5-year-old daughter could be that selfless and have that much love for her family and for the Lord, I knew that we were going to be okay. Thank you, guys.